There's no dirt in this, no dirt at all. No dirt, no rocks, no pebbles, nothing. This is all just coal. Coal, 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 coal.
Coal. Mines in Montana and Wyoming have it. China is hungry for more of it.
Numbers are of order. They're building one new coal power plant every week.
For that coal to get from here to there, the straightest line cuts across the Northwest.
Everybody's going after this coal thing, and it's almost got like a race.
5 spots in Washington and Oregon are pinpointed for coal exports.
We are standing just about in the middle of the coal export terminal.
Together, they could eventually handle up to 161 million short tons of coal every year. That's enough to power 42 coal power plants in China and fill enough trains to stretch from Seattle to the tip of South Africa. Thousands of new jobs will be created, say coal supporters, along with new tax revenue.
It's about $170 million infusion into the local economy from just payroll.
Under intense debate, the value or cost to everyone along the 1,400 miles between the mines and the ports.
This is the coal right here. This is what you'll be breathing.
You have 160 doctors saying this is not a good idea. What else do you need?
It's going to create some jobs, and we need jobs.
From Longview to the Gorge, Bellingham to Spokane, coal is hugely controversial in the Evergreen State.
I've never had an issue that is just such passion where people have called me and then I pick up the phone and they're screaming. They're just mad.
The list of concerns, as long as the train's bringing in that coal.
This is not your Amtrak commuter train. These are huge, monstrous, dirty coal trains.
It'll be probably 1 an hour, every hour, on the hour, 24/7.
We understand that coal is controversial, but it's one of the commodities that we're required by federal law to carry.
Not only do we see these trains coming through now, we're probably going to see more of them. And if we don't build the facility, we won't get any of the job benefits. It'll all go up north, and we'll essentially just have the trains coming through.
All along these banks, it's all coal. Make it 20 trains a day, make it 7 days a week. I'm telling you, knee deep, it'll be knee deep here.
For every worry, there's a promise from coal shippers to do it better, cleaner than anywhere in the world.
With advanced technologies and environmental safeguards.
Even TV ads tout the $2 to $6 billion boost coal could provide for this region's stagnant economy.
The choice? Create jobs here or watch them go elsewhere.
These are jobs that bring home paychecks in the $95,000 to $100,000 range.
Look at the amount of money that'll bring in for taxes for the county and for all the other projects.
The idea that shipping rocks to China is our economic future seems like a poor economic future to me.
I'm Anita Cassay. For this Impact Special Report, TVW goes in depth to give you a balanced look at the coal controversy and the burning questions about our potential as the coal shipping capital of America. What does a coal port actually look like, up close, in person?
That's the line of the conveyor belts. You take it from these piles all the way out there.
TVW travels to Canada to show you. Hear what it's like living with one in your backyard.
We're being blasted out of the northwest. Now we're going to be blasted out of the southeast.
It's just a matter of that's where it is and where you live.
How do we decide if and where coal should go here? What's in it for us? And should global concerns factor into our decision?
This is the example that we see here of what they're doing over there. This is what's really going on in China.
The coal is going to get shipped anyway, whether it's from Washington State ports or some other location in Canada, in Mexico, and somebody else is going to get those jobs.
A global controversy with Washington at the epicenter of this coal crossroads.
These are going to get ripe, and these will be beautiful.
In winemaking, just as in life,
It's going to be a great year. There's a lot of fruit.
there are a few golden rules.
It takes a lot of beer to make good wine.
But Don McDermott says it's another notorious saying that makes his grapes some of the most sought after in all of the Columbia River Gorge.
The best grapes see the water. These all see the water. It's just a perfect place to grow grapes.
Stretched across this hillside in Dowsport, Washington, the flourishing fruits of McDermott's labor.
These are my Zinfandel. Big berries already. This is the Syrah. The berries are a little bit more longer in shape right now.
But there's a variety he most enjoys bragging about.
These are my Grenache. I'm very proud of these. Some people didn't think I should plant these. They're a little bit cold sensitive, they're sensitive to freeze, but these are the greatest wine grapes. I've got more competition for this, more people ask me for these grapes than anything else. I'm really proud of them. That one can come off, and these wind wires need to get lifted up. This has been a kind of a cooler, a little bit wetter year, and we've got a lot of growth.
McDermott's dream always was to grow grapes in the sunshine.
There's a lot of labor that goes into a vineyard.
And to raise his family away from concrete. It's why in 1989 he stepped away from his suit and tie life on the East Coast to start over in shorts here.
This place came up on the market and it was kind of covered with junk. It had cows on it, and I could see that it was a really cool piece of property. So I put everything into buying this and developing this vineyard. I've got a couple $100,000 of cash just in this little vineyard that you see here. Cheers.
Like a bottle of fine wine, dreams don't come cheap, especially in this economy. And McDermott knows even something small could crush his dream.
See this chunk right here? I just picked it up off the ground. You can just break it up with your fingers like that. See that?
Scattered all around the train tracks that split his property.
This is not dirt. This is coal. That's all coal, solid coal. And there's just a ton of it here.
McDermott says it's from the occasional uncovered coal trains that traverse the gorge on their way to the coal-fired power plant in Centralia and coal ports in BC.
This is a transportation corridor, but you have to be responsible with a transportation corridor. You just do. The coal smoke is actually coming up and into the vineyard. You've got food-grade product, and you can't sell it with coal dust on it.
In a bit of irony, McDermott was a railroad executive who cracked down on coal shippers.
I love the railroad, and I'm a railroad guy. The railroad was the best company I ever worked for and the best job I ever had. I know, as well as anyone knows, that the rule is contain your load.
In fact, he wrote the legislation requiring them to. Now, with coal ports planned in Ferndale, Longview, St. Helens, Boardman, and Coos Bay, and this being coal's flattest, cheapest route to most, McDermott's fear.
Make it 20 trains a day. Make it 7 days a week. I'm telling you, knee deep. It'll be knee deep here.
Nowhere is the battle over coal more fierce in Washington than Whatcom County.
Say you want a coal train, $1 in your hand. We don't want your coal train running through our land.
From catchy songs on YouTube to competing coal yard signs, neighbors from Bellingham to Ferndale are divided over whether Washington's first coal shipping terminal should go here at Cherry Point.
Mama don't want no, baby don't need no coal train.
This has just brought passion. I mean, it's to some people, this is the biggest issue the world is ever going to see.
Gary Jensen is the mayor of Ferndale.
You've lived in the city your whole life.
I've lived in the city 56 years.
He's watched the people, then sales tax, then business slip out of town.
This was a Safeway grocery store, then it became a hardware store, now it's sporting goods. Over there was a Thriftway grocery store.
That's one reason Jensen is closely tracking Coalport plans. His struggling city, the closest, and stands to grow the most if the Gateway Pacific Terminal is permitted to go here.
We've got the Alcoa aluminum smelter pier, the ConocoPhillips refinery, and the BP Cherry Point refinery just behind us. But we're also in the Cherry Point Aquatic Reserve.
Lindsay Taylor is with the environmental group Resources and met us at the proposed site along the Georgia Strait.
Where would this facility go in and what might we actually see out there?
So just north of us here is where they plan to put the pier, and then there'd be about an 80-acre pile of coal just sitting right back behind here about a mile from where we're at now.
This is an aerial view showing the plans for the Gateway Pacific Terminal. Coal storage piles are surrounded by train track loops and connected to covered conveyors that run out to a wharf more than a half-mile long. Waiting there, the largest cargo ships in the world.
There are very few places on the West Coast that have naturally deep water that you don't have to dredge, and Cherry Point is almost the last one of those.
500 ships a year would pass through this waterway, picking up 26 million and eventually close to 60 million tons of coal, most of it destined for Asia. and all delivered to Cherry Point by train.
Isn't that cute? That's cute. I can live with that.
But Amy Glasser knows what follows.
And then when you try to talk and you try to do anything during that, it's pretty much impossible. And then the dogs can't hear anything when they're coming by. So pretty much life has to stop during this 20 seconds that they're doing what they're doing.
9 coal trains a day would pass Glasser's home in Custer.
Usually I sometimes count the cars just to remind myself how many more we'll have.
Each one 125 cars long. Round trip, that's 27 miles of train.
It's just nuts. And the only reason why this is happening is because some barons are going to make a lot of money out of it.
Sonny Meehan says he and Amy knew they were buying their dream home by the railroad tracks, but they fear it's becoming a nightmare.
What if someone has a medical emergency at their house and the train is blocking the ambulance, who, if they try to backtrack and go to the next stop, the train is there at that point, and so they'll be backed up there.
Chances of that are so slim.
Steve Jensen's mowing the same Ferndale property his family settled on.
Okay, here we go.
In 1890.
I'm like a block and a half from the train tracks.
How often do you hear it?
Every time it goes through. But you don't hear it. You get used to that. There's a lot of days when I go out of here, I see a coal train parked over there.
Coal's been coming through Whatcom County for a long time, going to Tawassa and the West Shore, but people didn't know about it. And now it's like, oh, we don't like those coal trains.
It's such a small inconvenience. I mean, so you gotta wait 2 minutes.
Jensen believes more people feel the way he does about the coal port.
A lot of people, they won't say anything. They're afraid to say anything. They don't want to be criticized by some tree hugger, to put it simply.
But he's speaking out, worried his younger neighbors don't have the same job opportunities he did during his 3 decades working out at the Intelco aluminum smelter.
Everybody's coming here and they've all moved in, but there's no jobs. Or it's a $5, $10 an hour job. It's going to create some jobs, and we need jobs.
We need these jobs in the most desperate way.
Mark Lowry is the president of the Northwest Washington Central Labor Council and brought up coal during the state's annual convention in August.
We've been fighting for something there for 30 years, and people have spent an entire career in labor trying to fill out this last opportunity.
We have a choice. Create thousands of new jobs in the Northwest or watch them go elsewhere.
High unemployment and an average family wage of below $49,000 a year make the coal industry's promise of new jobs very appealing.
Build terminals here. Build jobs here.
4,400 people will be needed to build the terminal. Once it's done, about 200 people will work at the site. But there's the so-called spillover effect that Ferndale's counting on.
The workers from there, that's who, they come and buy these sporting goods. They go to the grocery store, they go to the restaurant, they buy a meal. They're your Little League coach, or they're your volunteers. They're buying your homes. And so that's part of economy.
There's been studies done that show for every one manufacturing job, it supports 6 other jobs in the community. Everything from bakers to grocery stores, restaurants.
The company says 1,200 jobs like that will be created, providing ongoing tax revenue worth $11 million a year. Opponents are skeptical of those numbers, saying there are plenty of predictions, but no guarantees.
Appalachia is considered, it's a synonym for poverty. So if coal was such a great idea and it was going to be this economic boom, then I would think that Appalachia would be a burgeoning metropolis.
A counter study is often cited that says there could be a 17% net job loss within 10 years.
There's a lot of really amazing, innovative people that have great ideas that want to start businesses here in this community. And if this coal port happens here, a lot of that's going to change. This place is not going to be a place people want to come and build their lives. It's going to be a place they're moving away from.
Like Sonny and Amy.
I think this is not going to be our home anymore. I think we're done.
If it's unlivable, then bottom line is I lose $250,000 is There you go.
If people don't want to live here, opponents worry, why would they want to visit either?
I don't think that increasing the number of trains is going to change the number of tourists who are going to be going up to Mount Baker to go skiing or who are going to Birch Bay for recreation.
In Birch Bay, you can't miss the top attraction. It's that neon yellow candy store on the corner where the ice cream scoops
Be careful with that. She's a pro.
are just as bright.
Can I get
I would say the stuff in this case is the stuff that we are the most famous for. My personal favorite thing that we make is almond butter toffee down there.
And you better believe Keith Elise has tried almost everything.
Oh, maybe I've never done the chocolate layered Oreo,
It's the perk of working at the C Shop since he was 8.
but the rest of it, yes. My folks started the business in 1971. There's lots of people who are like, oh, you know, I remember my grandmother bringing me here when I was a little kid, and now I'm bringing my grandkids here, and it's really, it's part of the fun.
The possibility a coal terminal could be within 3 miles of his family's business
It'll be 326.
and keep tourists away, like critics fear.
Have a nice day.
I'm not certain that anybody would notice.
Elise says just look at the refineries already at Cherry Point.
I think oil has greater environmental impact potential if it spills than coal does. And we're already managing to load the oil in and out with a fairly reasonable record. So that seems like you ought to be able to do coal too.
You see these other terminals and you think, what's one more at this point?
And that's what some people say, right? What's one more? But one more could definitely be the nail in the coffin for some of these species.
Taylor says the terminal will have to fill in 140 acres of wetlands and is particularly concerned about the impact on herring, which are critical to salmon and the marine food chain here in the North Puget Sound.
This stretch of beach that we have here right now is the last remaining spot where they like to spawn. They like this bigger gravel. They don't like it super sandy. This is a perfect habitat. And if this pier gets built, if this facility happens here, you can pretty much say goodbye to them. They're not going to be able to make it.
We're looking at operational procedures which limit the amount of time that we operate during the herring spawning season.
Bob Waters is the Senior Vice President of SSA Marine, the company that would run the Gateway Pacific Terminal. It also operates at the Port of Seattle.
Today we're working a China shipping vessel.
Waters says the company's going beyond what's required to have the least impact.
We've gone so far in the engineering of this from the herring standpoint that we have a trestle that goes out about 1,100 feet out to a 3,000-foot pier. And we took and did a full year analysis of the angle of that trestle so that it had to put it out in just the right location so it had the least amount of shade impact on the foreshore, which would have, less impact on the herring as well.
Although coal was never agreed upon in the original permit here, Mayor Jensen supports SSA Marine's proposal to build a coal port with conditions.
We've worked a long time to make Cherry Point an aquatic preserve, and there's certain regulations in place. Only certain things can be built there, and it's an asset I'd like to use. There's very few deep water ports left. I'd like to see that asset used, but not at a detriment to my citizens.
Hi there. Are you familiar with the coal project? Have you heard about the coal?
The campaign against coal.
Can we get your signature over here? We're asking for a comprehensive cumulative study on the coal.
Is strong in Longview.
This used to be a large piece of coal, a single piece of coal. They say that they can put a surfactant on top of it, but as this coming across on the tracks, the clouds of dust just keep coming out because the material keeps breaking apart, just like it's on fire. Looks like a science project.
Les Anderson will discuss with anyone.
Okay, nice talking to you.
Why he believes coal shouldn't be allowed to do business in the Northwest.
There's so many people here in this community that don't know what's going on with this project. It's surprising.
Anderson especially likes the challenge when his neighbors disagree and support Millennium Bulk's plan to transform the old Reynolds plant along the Columbia River into one of the largest coal export terminals in North America.
At this point, I don't care what it is. Our economy is suffering so bad, and 99% of my family are unemployed because Reynolds closed.
And I hope you take this in the best way. Please take this way. It seems to me a little self-centered to think about just a few jobs within your own family when the community becomes at risk with the coal dust and the handful of jobs What makes you think that anybody in your family is going to be working there? Well, thank you. We're all working hard.
This isn't the only lobbying going on in Longview.
Welcome to Rotary. I'd like to introduce Ken Miller, President and CEO of Millennium.
The Millennium team is excited to be here today to share with you our plans for development.
Millennium Bulk is on a PR campaign of its own to convince community leaders coal and its $235 million in state and local tax revenue can be a good neighbor.
A lot of people aren't quite sure what a coal export terminal looks like, so this is a picture of the Carrington Coal Terminal in Newcastle. You can see these residential communities around the coal terminal, rail loop around here to park the trains on, stockpile area to store the coal in, and then conveyors running out here to the river to load the ships.
To get beyond the PowerPoint, Millennium Bulk invited TVW beyond the gates to see the site.
We are standing just about in the middle of the coal export terminal. So this will be an area where the stockyards exist.
If all the permits are granted, close to 50 million tons of coal could eventually be brought, stored, and shipped overseas from this spot.
This is a great location in the fact that it's a brownfield site, and by brownfield, we are not going to some new pristine location to create more industrial land. We're reusing, redeveloping land that has been in an industrial site for over 70 years.
The first phase of the $650 million project, clearing enough space for the first two massive coal stockpiles.
A bunch of material has been removed from this location, about 100,000 tons of material, and this is the final steps of cleaning up the containment pad.
Across the 416 acres, Kristen Gaines shows us the rusty shell of an old alumina factory that sat dormant 10 years.
These are the 1941 pot room buildings.
They'll eventually go too. New buildings will be added, along with slots for coal train deliveries and 2 new docks on the Columbia to load coal cargo ships in this deep water port.
We'll set between right about where we're standing right now and the second set of piles down in the river.
Here's what the whole site would eventually look like. The amount of coal here at any given time, Millennium says, about what you would see in Centralia, 1.5 million tons.
We've got to stop it somewhere.
Gail Kaiser,
all right, out to the garden then,
doesn't hide her animosity for coal.
There hasn't been a facility in the world that has figured out a way to control the coal dust. It's kind of like saying clean coal. Today I'm going to put in a few more tomatoes. Let's see, which one of you guys wants to be planted? We'll go for some brandywines.
This grandmother and gardener.
16 so far. Let's just go for an even 20.
Is also the president of Landowners and Citizens for a Safe Community.
When I first heard this, I thought this is a no-brainer because we are so green and clean in the Northwest, and now they want to bring the dirtiest fossil fuel in the world through here. I thought, oh, this will be easy to stop, but they pulled out the jobs issue.
35 people work at the site now on cleanup. Millennium says eventually it will be 135. And like Cherry Point, hundreds of construction and other jobs outside the port will be created as well.
That's the only reason I'm for it. I feel the economy needs the jobs so badly that at this point we need to kind of let whoever's willing to come in and provide even a few jobs come in and do that.
To fill maybe 100 to 130 jobs and risk an entire community's future, I think is not in our best interests.
Gary Lindstrom helped develop the Port of Longview and worries most about coal trains interrupting other industries at the port.
This is one of the busiest intersections in the state of Washington.
Lindstrom met us at the Lewis and Clark Bridge.
This area of southwest Washington is critical to the local industry. Along this industrial corridor are 2 of the largest paper mills in the United States.
And on these railroad tracks, we'll pass 8 full coal trains and 8 more empty ones every day.
The 1.3-mile train will cross all the intersections at the same time. Traffic will stack up over the Lewis and Clark Bridge. It's going to track down Industrial Way to the east and to the west, and it's going to stop Oregon Way here to the north.
If you get stopped by a coal train and you're the last car waiting in line on the Oregon side of this bridge headed into Longview, with the traffic signals, the thought is it could take up to 45 minutes to cross. Now, the railroad acknowledges the less than ideal situation here and says it's working with the rail company to expand these lines. Another option could be increasing the train speed through here up to 20 miles an hour, which they say would reduce the wait time down to 5 minutes. But it's not just traffic delays from coal trains that concern some people. It's also coal dust blowing from either the train cars or large coal stockpiles out in the open along the Columbia River. How can you contain that amount of coal?
Well, here the wind conditions, I think, are very favorable. We're 60 miles from the ocean.
Every afternoon we get the westerly winds that blow directly into the city center, and the first stop across there is the low-income housing area.
There has been a lot learnt about how to handle coal correctly.
During its presentation to the Longview Rotary, Millennium tried to ease dust concerns, showing videos and pictures of preventive measures starting back at the mines.
That's a spray bar over the top of the coal being sprayed on at the mine, and what that does is forms a crusting agent or a sealing agent.
It's almost the texture of a Elmer's school glue.
Ted Sprague is the president of the Cowlitz Economic Development Council. He saw the practice during a coal company-sponsored trip to the Black Thunder mine.
I saw coal piles in trains, in unit trains, moving and standing still, and I saw no dust blowing whatsoever.
Once in Longview,
the rail car goes into this large rotary frame, which starts to rotate the whole rail car.
Here's another video showing that process. To control any dust, jets like these spray the coal. Sprayers also help control dust from the stockpiles.
When there are unfavourable weather conditions, the stockpile sprays come on and wet the surface of the coal.
There's not a darn thing you can do to stop that dust.
Kaiser is skeptical water is the solution, considering what happened at the coal terminal at Roberts Bank in British Columbia.
This is taken earlier this year when a quote-unquote freak wind caused this dust kick up, this blow here.
It's pretty bad stuff. It includes things like mercury, lead, arsenic.
Dan Series is with Columbia River Keepers.
The track record of this coal company is not good at this point. Initially, the project was basically rubber stamped, and it was only when the real scale of the project became public that that approval was revoked.
When they first came in and filed for their shoreline permit here in Cowlitz County, they were looking at a 6.5-ton facility per year.
They ask on the CEPA report, do you have any plans to expand? And they say no, but the plans were already drawn up. The engineers had drawn the docks, and they had all the plans in place.
Through the legal process, they had to turn over papers in which it said they were using, or they were looking at up to 80 million tons per year. And they wanted that kept quiet because they didn't want the community to realize what was actually coming. I felt totally violated to realize that everything was a total lie. It made me think, well, why would anybody trust these guys again?
So we asked Millennium that. So did the company at that point deliberately try to deceive community leaders with that permit, or was it some other kind of misunderstanding?
I think it was a completely different misunderstanding. Once it was known that the permit was going to most likely require an EIS, the management team pulled that permit back and said, well, let us regroup and we will do the work necessary to make a submittal that's going to pass the standards and hurdles and requirements of an EIS.
Miller and his team say just look at the cleanup their company's doing now and the $50 million it's invested here, even without the guarantee of the necessary permits to ship coal.
We have already dramatically improved the condition of this facility in a year and a half.
Millennium is doing cleanup out there, and I applaud them for that. Let's get that area cleaned up, but then once we do, let's not use it for dirty coal.
America has more coal to ship than any other country. 1/4 of the world's reserves here, enough to last 250 years. In this video provided by Arch Coal, you can see some of that coal in Montana and Wyoming's Powder River Basin. But here's the dilemma. In the U.S., we're using less coal than ever.
Cheap natural gas has impacted the overall coal burn in the U.S.
Along with wind power and strict renewable energy rules, coal is still our largest energy source, but it's down to 42%.
This is the dying kicks of a dirty, dirty industry.
Robin Everett wants to end our reliance on coal altogether. She runs the Power Past Coal campaign for the Sierra Club and is proud they convinced lawmakers to eventually phase out Washington's only remaining coal plant in Centralia and Oregon's last one in Boardman. In Washington, we're down to 4% of our power coming from coal. In Oregon, about 6%.
I don't want to lock our state into decades of transporting dirty coal while the rest of the country moves into the clean energy future.
Coal's already been in Washington, and we've been hauling coal for many, many years.
In fact, 7 million tons a year goes through Washington up to British Columbia, where it's shipped across the Pacific via coal ports like West Shore, which provided this video.
West Shore Terminals, Canada's premier coal mover.
Around the world, demand for coal is hot. Never mind global warming, coal exports doubled in 6 years. India, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan all want U.S. coal. But half the world's demand is from China.
Numbers are of order. They're building one new coal power plant every week.
The reason they want this coal is because there's consistency of product, and also because it has lower ash and sulfur content and a high BTU content. So they don't have to burn as much of this coal to get the same amount of energy.
If we flood the market with our cheap coal, coal becomes more enticing to burn.
Which Everett says raises the ethical question at the heart of this coal crossroads. Just because we have the excess supply and capability to ship coal overseas, should we? Garrett Thompson
How's it going? Good.
is practicing more than patience, although he certainly needs it out here at Richmond Beach Park. The University of Washington sophomore
Looks like we have another one coming up.
is researching trains.
3 locomotives. My machine's picking up the fine dust particles in the air and we're trying to see if there's a difference between, passenger trains, freight trains, and other types of trains. Every train that passes by emits some kind of a fingerprint, and I can tell by the different types of particles and sizes that it carries with it and emits.
Thompson is particularly interested in possible dust pollution from coal trains, but takes measurements on all that pass for comparison.
Right now we're reading at about 44 micrograms. Oh wow. The total measured particulates that we could see went from about 44 micrograms per cubic meter to almost 108 just from that one train passing. So pretty significant difference.
The idea for this research originated here at UW-Bothell.
My lab measures ozone, nitrogen oxides, mercury.
Professor Dan Jaffe is an atmospheric chemist, intrigued by the coal issue, in part because of his previous research on weather patterns.
I had a hypothesis that we would be able to detect pollution from China that got transported on the winds. Turns out that hypothesis was right. The trip from China to Washington takes about 10 days on the air currents.
Environmentalists argue coal decision makers here should really consider that. China is already the source for almost 1/3 of the world's toxic emissions. Coal, a big part of that.
This is what it looks like in China when they burn it.
Coal is the largest contributor to global warming. As a pollutant, coal makes more CO2 per unit of electricity, so it's one of the dirtiest fuels.
Burning the amount of coal that could eventually be shipped through the Northwest, one study says, equal to the carbon dioxide from 40 million cars every single year. So using Jaffe's theory on the coal we ship over,
we will get some of that pollution back.
Like in the food we eat.
We know that China and their coal burning is a very important source to mercury globally and into our own fish, especially tuna fish. I know, having kids, the one food that we feed them a lot is canned tuna fish, and that's a problem food.
I think it's a little hypocritical for us to say it's okay for us to burn coal, and we'd rather you guys burn dirty coal. You guys go burn dirty coal because we don't want to send you our cleaner coal that would actually be an improvement to the environment. So if we're really concerned about the environment, shouldn't we be looking for the best resource that we can provide?
That's sort of like asking if your mother is a smoker And rather than giving her the highest tar and nicotine cigarettes on the market, we're going to give her a slightly lower tar and nicotine. And would that be okay? And the truth is, if it were my mother, it wouldn't be okay.
If the demand's there, they're going to get the supply. The fact that we're doing this and we're getting jobs and tax benefits has no impact whatsoever on how much is going to be burned over there.
To get a better understanding how a coal terminal could impact Washington, it's a good idea to look at other communities where coal terminals are already in place. The closest coal terminal is in British Columbia. A half-hour south of Vancouver, on a peninsula in the Strait of Georgia, is the West Shore Terminal at Roberts Bank. 32 million tons of coal come in by train and leave by ship every year, making this the biggest coal terminal in North America. TVW requested a tour to show you what actually happens at a coal terminal. West Shore declined, so we organized our own visit.
Push her out.
With Pat Grubb as our captain,
Orcas Island.
and Mary Tate as our guide.
It's like a rhinoceros auklet.
She's a biologist,
Double-crested cormorant. These are ring-billed gulls.
who really knows her marine and wildlife.
See the seal? Harbor seal.
Tate spent 10 years leading whale watching tours in these waters, mingling with massive cargo ships.
And there goes the full one. See how deep in the water it is? Because it's full.
From our outsider's view, you can still see how the coal gets loaded.
That's the line of the conveyor belt. So you take it from these piles all the way out there.
2-story tall piles of coal are churned by giant reclaimer stackers. Coal, by the bucketful, is then loaded onto the conveyors.
That's what's going to fill that ship, just that one big conveyor belt structure. And it just moves up and down, you know, filling the hole evenly. So here's your fugitive dust potential here.
The prevailing winds often sweep that dust out to sea. But as winds do,
the windsock is there to tell me which way the wind's blowing.
Frank Addison knows they change.
That's coal dust, cute stuff, so they say it's not coal dust. And you can see it along the ledge here. Now up above here is particularly bad. There again.
About twice a year, Addison gets to work, spraying, scrubbing, and wiping off every nook and cranny of his oceanside cottage in Point Roberts, Washington.
I have to do the windows every couple of weeks because they get filthy. And you know, with a view like this, you want to be able to see. You don't want to have to look through coal dust.
The black film is all over.
But you still see it in there. You can see it running down here. It's gross, isn't it? This side really gets it.
This dust,
pretty bad stuff.
It's just part of life for these neighbors with West Shore out their back doors.
We've lived here for 23 years, so I mean, the coal port's always been there. You know, they came first, not me.
Were it not for the dust, would you really notice the terminal?
You do hear a low rumble constantly. And the lights, I mean, they're really, really bright at night. I had one young girl look at him and go, "What city is that?"
There is a new coal freighter that's just coming in.
Addison likes to keep watch on what's happening 3 miles away.
You can see if the water's on, and right now it's not. So take a look if you want. It's the T's. You see 3 upright T's there? Right now it's blowing out of the southeast.
So all of that coal dust, if it's there, would be going into the ocean?
Yes. An open pile just blows, period. And there's nothing you can do about it. The way the wind blows at times, I've seen the whole thing disappear. You can't see a thing.
We have 979 boats in here, and I probably talk to 2 or 3 people a day that are complaining about the coal dust.
Jacqueline Everett manages Point Roberts Marina.
The coal dust is collecting all in the grooves along the side. It's just frustrating because they'll wash their boat, they'll come down the next week, and it's black again.
She says the coal terminal put up this dust collector here.
What is it?
It's half full of water. There isn't a speck of dust in there. You could drink it, it's so clean.
When you see that and you see the boats, what's happening?
It's not collecting anything at all. It's not working very well because that's crazy. The wind blows from the northwest, it's not blowing up and down. So it's going to go right over the top of a container like that.
Again, West Shore declined our numerous requests for a tour to see all of its dust prevention measures. But in a letter to homeowners, said the dust is only 15% coal.
No, it's really not coal dust. The material is organic material, and it comprises pollen and plant material and fibers with maybe a very slight amount of coal dust.
Do you buy it?
No, absolutely not.
But the agency that oversees air quality here pointed out the handful of registered complaints about dust are not from Point Roberts, but closer to the terminal in this small BC town with a tricky name.
Well, I don't know, some would say Sawasan, Tawasan. Sawasan.
This popular retirement spot, out of the wind just enough not to notice many impacts from West Shore.
No, I don't. I know it's there because I've been down there and looked at it.
It has to go somewhere. Why not here?
I'm actually doing some pulled pork in the oven.
Wes Levesque.
Today I'm doing a tomato and prawn bisque.
He's the chef at the Ken Village Community Center Cafe and talked to us about life in a coalport town.
Do you even notice that there's a coal terminal out there?
I guess being born and raised out here has just kind of become the norm. So you don't hear much about it. You don't, it's kind of just always been there.
And it certainly doesn't define this community.
When you think Tawasan, you think the ferry terminal. You never think coalports.
No, it's the birding around here, that type of thing. A nice place to live, and we have the beach close by.
If they were going to put in a new terminal here, would you want it?
No.
That's the reality facing Addison with Cherry Point.
We're being blasted out of the northwest, and now we're going to be blasted out of the southeast.
Are they telling us to get out, or what are they doing?
During our ride in the Strait of Georgia, Tate recalled her experience with dust.
On a calm day coming through here, absolutely flat, calm water, and you just see it just lying there, just drifting on the surface of the water.
That, coupled with more cargo ships,
they come through here, to get to Cherry Point.
It's a concern for her and why she believes research should be done on the potential of an additional coal terminal within 15 miles.
It's a marine environment. You do something in this hole, it's going to spread over the whole area.
With the lengthy review process, Washington may not be the first to ship coal from the West Coast. Across the Columbia River in Oregon, a coal export terminal hopes to get the competitive advantage by shipping coal in 2014. And how it plans to move that coal, quite different. Look out on the Columbia River, and the barges you see likely moving wheat, but these could have company from coal. And the journey would begin in Boardman, Oregon.
We'll build a long barn.
The site Clark Mosley's showing us is empty, but Amber Energy plans to transform this into a $250 million coal export terminal.
We'll receive coal by rail, and you can see the railroad tracks right here. And we'll have a receiving facility back here behind us.
The Morrow Pacific project isn't just this one port. There's a second site downriver near St. Helens. Coal would come to Boardman by train, get loaded onto barges, towed about 200 miles down the Columbia, then transferred to cargo ships at a dock like this. Amber, which is also behind the coal terminal in Longview, says the barge option is more environmentally friendly. It's smaller, at up to 9 million tons of coal a year, and none of that will be outside in a pile.
Our barges are enclosed, our transloader will be enclosed, so you will not see any coal, nor will there be any emissions.
It's business as usual. We've had a coal plant here in our backyard for 20-some years.
Gary Neal runs the port and says his town needs the jobs this terminal will provide, considering PGE is shutting down the nearby coal-fired power plant.
We have 145 employees out there that are going to lose their jobs in 2020, and we're disappointed in that.
This company isn't asking for any tax breaks. Instead, it's offering to donate 10 cents to schools for every 1 ton of coal it exports. That could add up to $800,000 for kids in 2 counties. With property and payroll taxes and port revenue, the company says 11 counties and several companies will share the $400 million wealth. Gunderson included.
This is panel fabrication for barge manufacturing.
The Portland company has a contract to build 15 of 20 covered barges needed for the Morrow Pacific project.
If we're doing river barges like these, we can probably do about 20 of them in 1 year.
CEO Mark Edson says that's enough work for 350 people at a time work is scarce.
It's not easy. With the recession and everybody's kind of clinched up and capital is not flowing real freely right now, and obviously rail cars and barges are high capital dollar items.
Once those barges are complete, Tidewater, with its signature smiley face, is on standby to tow them between ports.
We are the largest tug and barge operator on the Columbia River system.
The tugboats keep goods moving between Astoria and Lewiston.
Primarily wheat, petroleum products, fertilizer products.
But coal could be Tidewater's most lucrative customer. Dennis McVicker says the Vancouver company stands to bring in $29 million a year and will need new boats and about 100 people to build and captain them.
We're not entering the argument or discussion on whether the coal ought to move or not. There certainly is a demand for this product. You know, I believe it's going to get where it wants to go one way or the other. Well, if that can provide some jobs for people in Clark County and in Oregon and Washington, and we can handle this coal safely, then why not?
But this mode of transportation isn't without its own conflict. The tows pass through protected Native American salmon fishing sites. And even recreational fishermen, like Tom Wild,
I had one bite actually,
worry about extra barges and cargo ships.
Just sitting here, I see a lot of big ships going by like every hour. And I don't know where that'd help us any.
The barges coming down the river would roughly double the barge traffic on the Columbia River. I think our vision for the Columbia is something that's a little bit more than a coal superhighway.
I can look up and down the river right here. I can see probably 20 miles, and I don't see a barge tow in place.
The river can handle it. Our studies show that the peak river traffic was back in the early 90s, and at full capacity will be close to that peak river traffic in total tows.
What did it look like out here in 1995?
About what you see here.
Neil says coal would only add 3 to 4 more round-trip tows a day and thinks people need to let folks in Boardman, not outsiders like the ones who closed the power plant, decide what's best for this community.
They're not putting up smokestacks. They're not generating energy. We are part of this state, and I guess it's the state as a whole. And but we think we know what's right for our region.
The Morrow Pacific project may rely on barges to move its coal, but it still has to get to Boardman by train, their entry point into the Northwest. One of the cities often overlooked in this coal debate.
Trains are a part of life in Spokane. Everybody has train stories.
Carol Bryan included.
I came to Spokane because of the trains. That was the only way to get here from my hometown.
That was the 1960s.
More rhubarb lemonade.
Bryan still here, living a half mile from the train tracks.
I can almost come out any time at night and hear trains.
4 major rail lines meet in Spokane, making this one of the biggest rail hubs in the West. Every single coal train rolls through here on its way in and back out.
We have a little diesel fuel here, a little coal dust there, with a little mercury in the river. You know, we can't eat the fish out of the river, and just everything just kind of adds up to a huge health problem.
We're bringing these trains through here. We didn't ask for them to come through here. We just happen to be on a rail route. What are we gaining from this?
If all the coal ports went in, Spokane could see up to 60 more coal trains a day. That's on top of the 50 or so freight and Amtrak trains already passing by, and worrisome for Dr. Robert Truckner.
Spokane is getting little benefit from this, but yet we're bearing the burden of pollution, which ends up being health costs and health care.
It seems like it'll be a constant presence.
The coal dust isn't what most concerns this ER doctor and former EPA official. It's diesel exhaust from locomotive engines hauling that coal.
It's not the great zombie pandemic of 2012. You know, it kills you slowly. If you have the flu, for example, and you breathe diesel particulate matter, we know it makes the flu worse. If you have asthma and you're starting to have an asthma attack, it's going to make it worse.
Diesel exhaust toxins have been linked to things like higher blood pressure and risk for heart attacks. BNSF plans to spend $1 billion upgrading to new energy-efficient, low-emission locomotives. One train is like taking 250 big rigs off the road, and for every ton that's shifted off the highways onto railways like these, emissions reduced by 75%. BNSF says in 20 years, trains have gone from the equivalent of 235 miles a gallon
to 500.
Wouldn't you and I like to drive a car that gets that kind of mileage? We're the most fuel-efficient means of transportation the world has ever devised.
Fuel efficient or not,
things just come to a grinding halt when you have that many trains.
John Snyder is on the Spokane City Council.
One of my big concerns was if you push another few dozen, maybe up to 50 or 60 trains through crossings like this every day, where as you can see, we've got cars going by here every few seconds. You know, what does that do to disrupt our connectivity?
Snyder says trains can stop traffic here up to 12 minutes.
They're so long that you get out and look on the tracks and you try to figure out how long it's going to be, and you just kind of give up.
Building elevated crossings or bridges like this one would cost $10 to $20 million apiece.
That's money that could be used elsewhere. It could be used for sidewalks, it could be used for maintenance of roads, it could be used for asphalt repair, it could be used for some basic things that we really need.
We sympathize with the communities on that issue.
BNSF spokesman Stephen Forsberg says the railroad is only required to pay 5% of construction costs for upgrades at certain crossings. Federal, state, and local dollars make up the rest.
When you add that together on all the rail lines from here to Billings, we're paying a lot of money for them to make a lot of money.
The reality is that taxpayers paid for the construction of over 4 million miles of roadway in the U.S. There are less than 200,000 miles of railway owned by the Class 1 railroads. And there are more at-grade crossings than there are route miles of railway. So you can very quickly see that it's a problem. We don't invest on speculation. No one can afford to do that.
Forsberg says who should be investing now? Washington.
The more critical element for the state is what kind of signal is going to be sent to developers in the rest of the country. Is it still open for rail development?
For sure, it would mean sustainable jobs for the next several decades. This is Tacoma Yard, and it's served a lot of different purposes over the years.
Mike Elliott heads the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, the oldest labor union in the country.
Since the time I graduated from high school, which has been a while now, there's not as many jobs available. There's not as many opportunities in other areas, blue-collar areas. We can't completely pigeonhole ourselves into just electronic jobs or cubicle jobs. People that wear boots and gloves can come out here and make a living, and you ought to be able to do that.
A rail job with pay and benefits adds up to $100,000 a year, and 1 out of 4 connected to coal. So more freight means more crews.
The coal is going to get shipped anyway, whether it's from Washington State ports or some other location in Canada, in Mexico, and somebody else is going to get those jobs.
If the word gets out this is not a healthy place, then it's not going to help jobs at all.
Which is why Bryan questions whether coal is worth the risk, given what could be left along the way.
I mean, there's just piles of coal here. With the tiny amount of coal traffic that we have now, to have that much coal, the railroad is not telling the truth and the shippers are not telling the truth about loss of load.
They tend to lose up to 500 pounds of coal dust per car.
It's not acceptable to us, but we really don't appreciate when our own study is misrepresented to the degree that it was.
The NSF study did show trains can lose that much coal, but Forsberg says that doesn't mean they always do. And it's usually only within the first 100 miles.
We tracked it and saw that the farther away you got from those loading points, the less of an issue it became.
He points out it was the railroad, not environmentalists, who recognized the problem, and better load shapes and surfactant reduced loss by 85%.
You know, you can put surfactant on that if you want to, and you should because it helps a little bit, but still when the coal breaks down, this is what happens. And look, it's just plastered against the banks here.
As someone who worked with engineers to prevent train derailments, McDermott's deeply concerned about what this could do to the stability of the tracks.
In this particular spot right here, I think this is a potential problem spot because, you know, if you dig down, it's all coal dust. All coal dust in here.
We've never hesitated that this is not an issue that's acceptable to us. It isn't, and we're going to see to it that it's dealt with.
But the railroad can't force shippers to cover the coal.
We don't load the rail cars, we don't unload the rail cars. We think most shippers are actually going to come into compliance voluntarily on their own.
They don't care about losing a ton of coal. A ton of coal only costs them $1.50. The bottom line is you're not allowed to do chemical trespass in Washington State.
And this is going to be a case of chemical trespass for sure. We'll put collectors out here, and we will show that coal dust is showing up out here. Unless, of course, you want to cover the loads. It's all I've asked for the whole time is cover the load. Just cover the loads.
In the coming months, McDermott will be closely monitoring decisions made about coal and what's happening down here.
1 train a week, okay, maybe people ignore it. It's going through 1,000 miles of wasteland, and nobody's really paying much attention to their land out there. They don't care. But I care. My land is really important to me. My grapes have got a pretty good reputation, and we're making some pretty high dollar wines. The single label Grenache that I'm so proud of. Wine corks popping. One of the 3 great sounds. Sometimes you see in wine tastings, you'll see, well, it's got a tar flavor. I don't want a coal flavor in my wine.
But whether or not a coal port eventually goes here or here, the coal supporters say he's coming through anyway.
We're going to take the freight where the shippers ask us to.
The question is, do they take a left-hand turn at Cherry Point and be exported there so Washington State gets the jobs and the tax benefits, or do we have the same impacts from rail and go all the way up to Canada?
A few hundred jobs up in Whatcom County is something to grab onto for sure, but is it worth really putting at risk every community from Montana all the way through? I don't think so.
The EPA, Oregon's governor, and close to 100 other elected officials want all the Northwest projects studied together. A cumulative review looking at the impacts all the way from the mines to the ports to the smokestacks in Asia.
My husband and I have been watching these coal trains go past our house for 4 years now.
Bellingham Mayor Kelly Linville says coal trains will cross her city's most valuable property, but interstate commerce law prohibits cities from regulating what's transported through. That's not stopping Bellingham or all of these other cities from asking and hoping to be part of the environmental review process.
I believe that not only does Bellingham stand to have some impacts from this, but every other city that has the trains going through it has the same potential liabilities.
Someone needs to start adding those things up and looking at the whole picture before it's too late.
But that possibility rejected by the Army Corps of Engineers, at least with the Morrow Pacific project in Oregon, and the scoping for the project at Cherry Point moving along on its own. Either way, both sides know it will be months, maybe years, before coal's future in the Northwest is ultimately decided.
Some of the things that we just don't have any control over in climate change, for us to say, well, we have to look at the entire global climate change picture before we can have a facility in Washington State or Oregon or wherever. I think that's bad policy. I think that would set a bad precedent, and all you're going to do is delay or ruin opportunities for Washington State and for people that need jobs in America.
They speak up about other countries' pollution. They speak up about other states' pollutions. And yet it's our government in our state. And there isn't anybody who's running for office, who's in office, who is thinking of going into office, who's willing to stand up and say, I don't need an EIS. This is a bad idea.
I object to people who are saying no to the permit and we should never even consider it when that process hasn't happened. In America, if you're going to live in a democracy, you have to have the ability to say, great, I have the right to turn this permit, and we have a right to say yes or no.
Once that document's done, then we can take a look at it, determine whether we think it was a fair assessment or not, and if we assume that it was, and it does tell us that we can do this without affecting this place that we love, then let's move forward. But if it tells us that if we do this, it is going to dramatically affect the place that we love, that we're not going to be able to preserve the things that we want to preserve here, then we need to say no to SSA and move on and find something else.